Hello to everybody watching. I am super excited to have on my newest guest. Her name is Chelsea Pierce. Now, Chelsea works with binge eating and overeating clients that want to learn how to reduce this um, side effect. Sorry, my brain isn't braining right now, but you all know what I mean. She works with people that are suffering from binge eating and overeating and has a program on how to address these issues. And so we're going to get into a little bit about her background, why she started this program, what are some of the mistakes that people are making, and what you can do about it. So, Chelsea, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what it was that prompted you to start or to gain interest in binge eating, overeating, and like why did you start this program?
Yeah. So I started it because it was something that I struggled with for most of my life. And I didn't even know what was actually going on. I knew that there was something different going on with me and food, but I really couldn't put, a label on it if we wanted to label it. Um, my first memory of soothing myself with food was when I was 5. I was hanging out with a kid down the street, and he said something mean to me, and I came home crying. And then the next thing I remember was sitting in front of the TV with a bowl of popcorn. And so this trend continued for most of my life. I always remember just always wanting to eat. And I just thought that was like normal, like everybody was like that. And it wasn't until my 20s where I was like, man, like this really isn't normal. I feel like it's a problem, where I would be telling myself not to eat, like, I'm not hungry, like, don't eat this, we don't need to eat this, we just ate whatever. And I just couldn't stop myself, and I couldn't figure out why this was happening. The only thing that I could come up with was that I was just a food addict, that like an alcoholic or something like that. Because I hadn't really heard the term binge eating. Sure, I heard of emotional eating, when we have a breakup we go to the ice cream or something like that. So that's why I thought it was kind of normal, because I heard other people talking about these similar circumstances. But what was happening with me felt so much bigger and so much deeper. And one of the memories that I have, this was again sometime in my 20s, where I was out with friends and we were eating chicken wings. That was one of my like kryptonite foods. And she said to me, I can't believe how many wings you ate. And I was sitting there thinking, I want to eat more. And I was like I was so embarrassed and ashamed. And like this was again one of many different circumstances where I wanted to continue eating, but I felt like I shouldn't for whatever the reason be. um so when I learned what binge eating was, it happened actually when I was listening to a podcast, and this woman was speaking, and I was like, she is describing everything that I am experiencing. And she, yeah, called it binge eating. And I was like, okay, cool. Now I know what's going on. I'll be able to fix it. And that wasn't the case. I continued working with different people, personal trainers, dietitians, nutritionists. And now that I knew what was going on, I would explain it to them, and they'd be like, yeah, okay, no problem. And they still really, they just didn't understand what I was going through. They'd say, well, once you finish your plate, just stop eating. And I'm like, I get that. I'd really love to do that, but it's like I can't, right? Like I had this separation between what I know I should be doing versus what was actually happening. No matter how many times I told myself to stop or don't or whatever, I just couldn't. Or maybe I could for a couple of days, and then it would just come back even worse. So yeah, it was a big challenge because I just didn't know how to fix it. I even went to psychologists who kind of gave some helpful information, but again, they just didn't get it. They've got the book information, but because they've never actually experienced it, they just didn't quite get it, and nothing actually gave me long-term results. So yeah, I was struggling for so long. And just these feelings of guilt and shame and embarrassment of my eating habits, feeling like food controlled me because I was always thinking about it, always, you know, dreaming of what I was going to have next. Even when I was still eating, I'd be like, "Ooh, what's next?" And it was a big struggle for me. The confusion, I think, was the biggest thing, right? As I said, I knew what I should have been eating, or what was an appropriate amount, or a portion size, or all these things, and I just couldn't do it. And it was so weird to literally sometimes be in physical pain from being full, and yet I would continue to eat. So those are just a couple of things that happened to me as I was going through this experience of binge eating and emotional eating. So yeah, I know that there's a lot of people out there that are going through this as well, and probably a lot of people like me who didn't know what was happening, and if they did know, they didn't know what to do about it. So that is why I started my
Um,
business.
Amazing, amazing, Chelsea. And everything that you're talking about personally really hits close to home for me as well. I think one of the things that I really struggled with, which you mentioned, was just that everybody else seemed to not have this issue. Like all of my friends were slow eaters. They were, they had portion control. I was always that kid that would get like two extra large plates of food. Like if I was at a buffet, I'd eat like three times as much as everybody else. I even remember this one story. Not when I was a kid. This actually only happened a couple of years ago, but we went blueberry picking, my husband and I. We got like two like 10-pound buckets, and within like a 24-hour period, I'd eaten like an entire one of the buckets, like 10 pounds of blueberries. And I was just like, what? That's just like how much I normally eat, you know? And it's really only in recent years that I've seriously started to be like, okay, you know what? This is not good. This is not healthy. This is not normal. And I don't think I ever quite experienced any, or I just never got diagnosed with any eating disorders or experienced any like long-term physical pain or side effects or anything like that from eating too much and eating too fast. Because like you said, I just thought that it was just normal and everybody else was weird. And I was like, how is everybody already full after eating like this tiny like bowl of soup or bowl of rice or whatever? Whereas here I am like, eating as if there's no tomorrow. So one of the things that I've really been wanting to know how to do is, because I'm aware now of how unhealthy it is to binge eat and overeat and eat too fast, is how I can also learn how to control um, what I eat. And I think what you're going to share on this podcast today is going to really be helpful for like myself and anybody else who's watching that's struggling with the same issue. So wanted to talk about then, like, you mentioned that you'd gone to a couple of doctors, you tried speaking with different consultants, read like many books, but nothing had worked. And I'm sure that a lot of people watching right now are also thinking like, yeah, like I've tried talking to a bunch of different people as well, and nothing's working for me too. And clearly, like, there's something wrong with our approach. We're probably making a lot of mistakes. What kinds of mistakes like do you see commonly within people that enroll in your program? And why are we making these mistakes?
Yeah, why we're making them? That's a good question. And I think it's because we just don't have different information. We're doing the best that we can with the information that we have. And unless you speak to somebody who works specifically with binge eating and emotional eating, they typically have the same information that we already have, maybe on a deeper level. So the first mistake that I would say that people experience when they're trying to address this, and maybe before I even go into this, like if you're listening to this and you're a person who can go on a diet and stick to it and get the results that you want, and you keep those results, cool, that's fantastic, so happy for you. This is probably not for you. This is for the people who have tried everything and they may be able to stick to it for a little while. They may even see results, but in the end, they just keep going back to their old ways. So those are my people. Um, And so the first problem the first mistake that people usually make is focusing on what or how much they are eating. So again, this is like the typical diet, right? What are you eating? How much of it are you eating? Track your calories, track your macros, track this, do this, do this, do this. Don't eat this, don't eat this. These things are bad, right? So all of that is actually just focusing on the symptom, which is the food. So, for example, like if you have a sore throat, that's just the symptom. But why do you have a sore throat? You need to address why you have the sore throat, not just try to make this throat stop being sore, which, sometimes can help. But think of, any diets that maybe you have tried in the past. Right, everybody always says cheat days, and or they've fallen off the wagon, these kind of things. So that's because they're just focusing on, again, the symptom, the food, what they're eating, instead of actually looking at what's driving them to the food in the first place. Because like, so this isn't common, but you can binge, let's say, on carrots or blueberries, which are healthy foods, right? But if you're still eating in excess and to a point where you're feeling bad about that, that's when it's, something that maybe needs to be looked at. So that would be the first mistake that I see people making. The second mistake is also not imagining or envisioning what I like to call it, what their ideal life of food with food looks like, right? What they're focusing on typically is, I don't want to do this. I don't want to eat this. I don't want to feel this way. So they're focusing on all of the negative stuff, what they don't want. So, and if any of you know anything about the subconscious mind, what you focus on, you create more of. So if you're focusing on what you don't want, you're just going to get more of that. So you have to flip that script and focus on what you want instead. So I want to eat calmly. I want to sit down and feel like this food is going to fill me up and nourish me, just for two simple examples, right? So the more that you focus on that, your brain is going to start finding reinforcement for making that true, basically, right? And this doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It's not like, oh, I'm going to think this way and then it's going to happen. This is something you need to do for a long time, sometimes along with other things, to get those results. So this is a little bit different than goal setting, right? Because we've all probably had goals. Again, when we go back to, let's say, a diet of, I'd like to release weight or maybe eat less sugar or whatever. But this is about getting into the feeling of how you want to feel with food. So that
100%.
Yeah. So that would be the second mistake that I see people making. And then the third, which is probably the biggest one, is not having the right tools or techniques to address what's really going on. So again, instead of addressing the symptom of the eating, they need to address the root cause of the eating. And willpower is a crappy tool when you struggle with binge eating and emotional eating. And why willpower doesn't work is because the subconscious mind is what's actually driving us to the food. And the subconscious mind is always going to be stronger than the willpower. So having the right tools to address that subconscious mind and the things that are fueling it, so the patterns, the habits, the emotions, um, is what's going to make the biggest change. So when people just try to talk themselves out of eating, again, it may work for a little while. I mean, I've had, again, success on diets too for a while, and then it's just all fallen apart after that. So, and that's because I didn't have the right tools to address what was really going on. So I find that's the biggest thing, and that's one of the things that I work with my clients on the most, is giving them the tools to address what's going on when those urges to eat come up.
So let's talk a little bit about those tools that you use in your program. The subconscious, I feel like, is a still relatively unexplored area of habit change. Like you said, most people are just trying to brute force their way into getting certain results, and as a result, they're only able to stick with it for a short amount of time. What would you say would be are the most important tools that you offer to your clients? And also, like, what do you notice about, or what patterns do you notice with clients' subconscious programming that are causing them to eat so much. So talk a little bit about like the mindsets they have and the solutions you provide for them.
Wow. Well, the mindset, I'd say that probably the most common mindset that I come across with my clients is like, I'm doomed to stay this way forever. I can't change. Like, I've tried and it doesn't work. And that's again because I have been trying the wrong things. So, working through that is one of the first things that we do is like, change is possible. You just need the right tools, the right techniques, the right support in order to do that. Um, and I use a lot of different combinations of techniques, but the two staples would be something called belief or patterning, which actually is the go-to technique that I've learned to how to think positively. And it works for so much more than just positive thinking, but it is a step-by-step sequence, 7 steps that actually takes you from that negativity, that spin cycle, the woe is me place, to actually feeling confident and empowered and like you can basically do anything. And it works with basically the way that your brain learns, right? You have to acknowledge what's going on. You can't just push away the feelings, pretend that you don't feel like crap. You have to be like, hey man, I feel crappy. I did this thing and I don't feel good about it. And then work through it, and show your brain how you can actually do it and find evidence that you've done it before. So that's the premise of how belief or patterning works. Um, and it sounds complicated, but it's really not, especially when you have somebody walking you through it all. Um, and then the other technique that I use a lot is EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping. So that actually, especially when I combine those two techniques, belief or patterning and EFT, it just really amplifies the ability to work through the emotions. EFT is really great at releasing the stored emotions. I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but you tap on different points of your body, which are basically meridian points. So it's kind of like a Eastern medicine, right? So those meridian points are associated with emotions. So as you tap on those different points, you're releasing these emotions from your organs, from all different places of your body. So combining that with talking about what is happening, your feelings, what you would like to feel instead, is so powerful. So those are the two staples that I use. I combine them along with other things like regression therapy and soul retrieval techniques. That I have learned over the years. So, I've took specific training in belief or patterning, as well as how to help people through their challenges with food. And it wasn't until I learned the EFT techniques and combination with other things and the specific tools, without getting too ahead of myself, the tools to address those different subconscious aspects, that is when I was able to get the biggest change in my eating. And where I actually finally was like, wow, this actually works and there is a solution. Because before that, I literally was like, well, I'm just going to be this way forever. Um, so yeah, those are the main techniques. I know you asked me another question about that, but it slipped my mind about the subconscious.
No, I think you answered it. I think you were the question I asked was like, what are some of the common like mindsets and I guess maybe things that people say that you need to address, and you mentioned that it was that they feel like they're going to be stuck that way forever, which
Yeah.
is where the belief repatterning comes in. I wanted to ask maybe and go a little bit deeper into these two techniques that you mentioned, because I find it just so fascinating that there's all this. Um, there are entire branches of medicine that we don't really tend to study in the West, that we don't tend to explore. And you were talking about how you can like tap different like meridians of your body to release certain emotions. Can you give me some examples of like how you would release certain emotions, like where you would tap, like which I guess parts of your body are associated with like certain organs, like how would that work exactly?
Yeah. So to make it simple for pretty much everyone, when we use the EFT technique, there's a couple of different variations of it, but the one that I use, and I would just say it's probably the most common, is that you tap through, I'd have to count how many different points, let's say like 8 or 9 different points. And by tapping through all of those ones, you're basically addressing every organ and every possible emotion that there is. So you're just like kind of doing a blanket approach. And what is really interesting, and I've noticed this for myself when I have done my own work, so there's, like I said, some different points that address different organs and different emotions. So there's one that is like right on the side of your body here. I don't know if you can see that. For ladies, it's like right where your bra is on the side under your armpit, but not like your armpit itself. So that point is specifically for anger and the liver. And so when I have been doing some tapping, I've noticed that, I just tell my clients to kind of tap through the different points at their own pace. I don't really guide them through unless they're like brand new. Um, and it's really interesting to watch them or myself, where you spend more time with your tapping. And that can often signal maybe there's something a little bit more there in terms of like either anger or sadness or fear or anxiety or those kind of things.
Mhm.
But yeah, by tapping all of them, you're kind of leaving no leaf unturned. So yeah, that's the best thing that I would recommend. And what I do with my clients, there is often sometimes anger is a big thing, that especially for women that we have gotten really good at suppressing, right? Even when we're really pissed off, we'll just say, oh, we're frustrated, right? We don't even own that we're angry. So a
Mhm.
lot of my clients and myself included had to have to do a little bit more work on the anger stuff and how to release that and how to fully express that. um, and so a lot of times I'll just get them to, tap on that one point that's under their arm a little bit more, or just focus on that one point. But it's not necessary to focus on one specific area to have an emotional release, because they all kind of work in tandem together. Often if you're angry, you also have some sadness, or maybe you have some fear as well. There's often not just one single emotion that we're looking at.
For sure, for sure. Have you seen people do the meridian tapping and seen people not do the meridian tapping in your program, and you've like seen noticeable differences between the ones that do and the ones that don't?
Everybody has done it. So
Fair
I
enough.
did have
Okay.
one client that sometime was like, I just don't want to do it today. And that's okay. And so
Hmm.
what's really cool about this work and the energetic work behind it, is that I can do the tapping like what's like surrogately. So like if I'm working with you and you're like, I don't want to tap, cool. I will do the different tapping points and it has the same effect.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That, yeah, I think for a lot of viewers, this will kind of be like the first time that they're hearing this. They'll be like, "What? Like you could just like tap certain parts of your body and it'll like release certain emotions." That's unheard of. But there's so much that like I said has gone unexplored in our Western medicine, that even if it's something that you feel like is unheard of or not familiar, it's really worth a try to like explore all these different techniques, especially if you've seen them work for yourself and so many others that you've worked with as well. And I wanted to also talk about the belief repatterning. So can you give an example of like, I know you mentioned the it's always going to stay this way, it's never going to change. Like what are some like, maybe we can use that as an example. How would you use belief repatterning to make them reprogram their subconscious to believe that change is possible?
Yeah, so I can do a quick example of what I would work with or what we would do with a client. Um, and it can, some of these reprogramming sequences, I guess you can call them, they can be finished in a minute and sometimes they take half an hour. It really depends on what's coming up, right? We want to address any of those little voices that come up. They're there for a reason. They're trying to keep you safe. That's your subconscious mind talking to you. So as I'm working with a client, if they're like, oh, the little voice is saying this, okay, we'll address it. And sometimes the little voice doesn't say anything. And what's really cool is when that little voice starts cheering you on. and becoming your inner coach. So, okay, for an example of I'm always going to be this way. We start with forgiveness, saying, I forgive myself for believing that I'm always going to be this way. And then we move on to permission, as I give myself permission to believe that I can be different, even if I don't know how that's going to happen, right? That's a really common thing, but I don't know how. So by putting that little caveat on there, it kind of makes that little voice go, okay, cool. The next step is choice. So you could say, I can choose to believe that I'm going to stay this way forever, or I can choose to believe that there's another possibility out there. So I choose to believe that there's another possibility. So those are the first 3 steps. And then we go on to figuring out where you can feel this way in the future. And you don't want to be like, well, I'm going to believe that I can be different when I don't eat all the food on my plate or something, right? Like that is too big of a stretch. And that little voice is going to go crazy, right? We want to make it so that it's possible and believable and realistic for yourself. So, I am free to feel. So I often pick an emotion. So if you don't want to feel this way, how do you want to feel? Let's say calm, right? So we're going to play with the word calm and say, I'm free to feel calm tonight when I lay my head down before I go to bed, right? Simple. We're all going to go to bed. And then, okay, you can feel calm in that moment. And so what's really cool about that, again, in the subconscious mind, because you've said that statement, even if you don't remember to be like, oh, I'm intending to feel calm right now when I go to bed, your subconscious mind is like, yeah, this is calm, right? It's already playing out that program for you. And then the next step is what we call affirmation. And it's not the typical affirmation of, I am this. It's actually, if you look at the definition of affirmation, it's like stating something that you know to be true. So when in the past did you feel calm? So you can say, I felt calm when I drank my cup of tea this morning. Right? Or it could even be 10 years ago. I felt calm when I was sitting by the beach in Mexico, right? It doesn't have to be recent, which is super cool. So playing again with that same emotion, because we want to tie this new feeling of feeling calm around eating to something, a time where you have felt calm in the past. And again, that's the super cool power of the subconscious mind, is it doesn't have to be related. Calm is calm. And then the
Absolutely.
next step is a surrender step, which is basically where we're now claiming it. Is so, and this is also where these typical affirmations can sometimes pose a problem or a challenge for people, right? If you say, I am calm, and your little voice goes, no, you're not. You're basically just reinforcing that you're not calm. So if you say, okay, I am calm, and your little voice goes crazy, you want to reframe that to say, I am learning to become calm. And that will often be like, oh, okay, learning or becoming, or I am working towards, or, just switching that to an in process type of statement instead of that affirmative piece. And then another step, obviously, is gratitude. That can be sprinkled in anywhere. But sometimes I'll just put it at the end. But if there's ever a time when that little voice is going crazy, whether you're doing repatterning or something else, gratitude is a great go-to. It's going to raise your vibration no matter what, as long as you're actually grateful for that thing. And you can't make it up. Your subconscious mind knows. So, I'm so grateful for the fact that I am working to becoming more calm, or I'm grateful for that time at the beach where I felt calm. Um, yeah. So that was a quick example of repatterning with a little bit of explanation in there.
Amazing, Chelsea. I love that so much. And I think everybody that's familiar with, spiritual healing, entrepreneurship, all these different areas have probably delved into a little bit of this type of subconscious programming, practicing gratitude, practicing like reaffirmations, all this kind of stuff. And I really want to, because we just have a short amount of time left, I really want to hit the point home just how important it is to be able to reprogram your subconscious, by asking, other than, transforming your habits around binge eating and overeating, have you seen these practices help you in all other areas of your life as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I started using belief patterning before I really got into my work with binge eating. It was something that I started just for my personal use, actually, and that's learning this technique is actually what drove me to want to start a business, because during COVID, I was like, I was doing all right. I won't say it was a cakewalk, but I had these tools and techniques and a community of people that were helping me as well. And I was sitting there one day and like, I need to share this with other people. I can't keep this to myself. People out there need it. So it helped me during COVID. It has helped me with so many different things in my life. Like I can't even begin to say everything it has helped me with, because it's done so much to really just shift the way that I'm looking at everything. I'm again, I'm not perfect. Nobody is, but I can often look at something that somebody would be like, man, this is like the worst situation. And I'll find something to be grateful for about it. And like 10 years ago, I feel like that's bullshit. And now it's like, no, it totally works. And it's not just woo woo, it's not toxic positivity, because you actually believe it.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like I've only really started delving into this kind of stuff less than 2 years ago, and already I'm starting to see massive shifts in like my mindset, but also the way that people treat me, the opportunities that I get to have, the experiences I get to have, like building wealth, all this kind of stuff. Like even if I were to enroll in your program, and if I wasn't focused on binge eating and overeating, I'd still see all of these other shifts happen in my life that I wasn't expecting in particular. So it's like, even if a certain topic that you want to improve is not necessarily what you want to focus on, there are always other areas that having this belief repatterning will be able to give you some more clarity on. So Chelsea, really wanted to thank you for being here. You've provided so much amazing insights and wisdom for everybody here today. And I feel like you really like just took the words out of my mouth for some of the things that I wanted to say about like what I was experiencing, and what you've been experiencing in the past as well. And I really want to be able to spread the word for those that are experiencing binge eating and overeating, and just wanting to improve their overall lifestyle. So thank you so much for being here.
yeah, thank you for having me. It was fantastic. And yeah, I really hope that other people found this valuable and that they've learned something new.
Do you want to just quickly mention where people can find you?
For sure. Yeah, my website is dancingthroughfire.com. And I'll just give a quick explanation, because like, that has nothing to do with food. And no, it doesn't, because the feeling of dancing through fire is basically how I want all my clients to feel at the end of every session, at the end of their program, is that basically like you can dance through fire and not get burned and just have the time of your life.
Amazing. Thank you again so much, Chelsea. And I hope that we get to reconnect soon.
Yes, me too. Thanks again, Simon.